I live just north of London here. I've been here quite a long time. Been building canoes since I guess the mid to early 70s sometime. Actually, one of the gentlemen here got me started at building canoes, and those are his forms back there, leaning against the chairs, and the one laying on the floor. There's got to be about probably seven or eight canoes taken off of those forms, and then this form goes along with this boat. There's about 3 or 4 canoes taken off of that already too. So you can build as many as you want once you get the material ready. I think I built, I don't know, 9 or 10 canoes, so it's quite a few already. I want to just mention some terms here so that when we go through these slides that we know what you're talking about. This assembly here is called a strong back, and this is, it's the backbone of the canoe. You need to build this correctly, and you want to get it straight, because any deformities in the strong backs or the forms is going to be built into the canoe. If you look down a canoe down the line and one of these is offset, the boat will go like this and then continue on. So you do want to use a center line on these forms when you line it up with the string to make sure that they're correct. These are called forms. The strips are stapled on, and that's what holds the whole thing together until you get the glass on it. So that's where we start. This is the stem piece. You notice that there's holes in there. That's to make, this is the stem piece. All the strips end up attaching onto this such a way. This has to be beveled in order for them to start. The instructions that I had originally told you to laminate this together, and I found out that that was a lot more work than I wanted to do. So what I did is take this stem piece off of here, and I traced that onto a piece of half-inch plywood, actually 2 pieces of half-inch plywood that I laminated together. It was treated plywood. So instead of being laminated cedar, it ended up being laminated treated plywood, which has worked real well. This is the hull. It's 1/4 inch thick by 3/4 inch boards, covered with fiberglass on both the inside and the outside. This whole system here is called a gunwale. This would be the outwell, this would be the inwell. Those I make on ash. I found ash works better than oak because if you get oak wet, if you chip a finish on it, it gets kind of a purple, blue, black, and it's hard to get that out of there again. You have to sand it off. Ash doesn't have that tannin in it, so it doesn't give you that problem. All the boats have extra layers of glass, probably from about here all the way up, and then even more right here, because anytime you get into a little collision in the water, this is the part that's gonna take the hit. So I put extra glass on there. The seats are cane. I've been buying these seats. I found a place in Vermont you can buy them for about $36 to $40, and you can't come close to building your own for that kind of money. They're also dish, so it keeps you centered in the boat real nice. Carrying yoke in the middle, good for transporting the canoe. A little hard on your shoulders. I found another place that sold it looks like this. It's made out of plastic, and it's got a rubber liner in it that sits right here, one on each side, and it actually holds onto your shoulders. It makes carrying a canoe way easier if you intend on ever portaging. The decks are oak. This is a bronze pad eye. This is your connection between your canoe and your vehicle. You don't want that to fail. It would be ugly. But I found those on a Chesapeake Light Craft. I have all these sources in a handout we'll have a question time afterwards. And if you have questions as we're going through, just ask. It's pretty informal. We got till 4 o'clock. Obviously not going to build a canoe, but hope you give you enough information to get you started or get you interested anyway. So that's a picture of a finished canoe at my house. That's got to be back in the 90s, early 90s, judging by the swing set on the hill. Another view, I believe that that is a boat like this. It's probably not this one, but it's one like it. That's an 18-foot, kind of a rounded bottom. It resembles a Winona Sundowner. I found a spec sheet on a Winona Sundowner, and I measured it against this, and I think somebody did a little infringement there. It wasn't me, but it sure is real similar. Now there you can see the thwarts that were recommended to put in these boats, and that's because the seats are actually hung from the gunnels. I don't do that anymore. If you didn't notice in this boat, there's actually a block glued on the side of the canoe, and the seat is attached to that, so access support. One of the things I changed through the years. These are the patterns. They're half patterns. They're actually laid out on that table over there, and those patterns are what make this strong back here. You lay them on a piece of plywood. You trace one side, you flip it over, trace the other side, and keep track of the center line, because down the road you're going to want to line up those center lines with a string. So it makes it real handy by having half patterns like that. And if you notice, well, it's probably hard to notice here, but that canoe is symmetrical from end to end. It's exactly the same, any similar point along the hull. This one is asymmetrical. It's a little narrower in the front. An engineer would probably understand that being a little narrower in the front, it'll cut the water a little better. I don't know. But it is asymmetrical. If you see these two forms there, it's obvious there that this one is wider than that one. So this would be the stern, and this would be the bow. And if you look at the pairs, and I actually have them laid out over there. If you hold them, they'll be about 3/8 of an inch different from the one, this one with its mate on the other end. This is how this is made, this stem piece, in the instructions. You take cedar strips, cut them very thin, maybe a 1/16 or maybe 3/32, and you actually start on one end here, and you layer glue, and then you clamp it consecutively around, and you make that bend. It works real well. It seemed like a lot more work than I cared to do, and that's why I came to use the plywood part of it. This is the way that was recommended in the instructions. This is a setup on a table saw where I sawed strips. I had a 32-foot building, and I was sawing 16-foot lumber, so I had to open a door on one end. So I had just enough to get the saw, or the lumber out of the saw. And these are little helper rollers here, and I actually had a table in the back. And you can see the table here, the 2x4 on it that made the table would say height past the saw here. And then I actually had it, this is an extension of the fence, so it helped me to keep a straight edge on that lumber as I saw it. It's really handy to have two people doing this. I've learned to do it alone because my wife doesn't like the dust or the noise, but it's handy to have two people. With these rollers and with the table in the back, you can do it alone. Another view from the other end, and of course the open door. And it pays to do a good job sawing. If you get a lot of wandering as you're sawing this lumber, you'll get thin spots and thick. You won't get thick spots so much as you get thin spots. And there again, you got to sand around that when it comes time to finish the hull. So the more true you can keep the strips, the easier it is down the project. This is actually a view of this strong back upside down on some sawhorses. I guess it shows the construction. When you pick out a couple pieces of lumber here, you want to try to find a couple of real nice straight 2x4s. And if there is any crown in them, try to put it up because it will probably settle down. I found some real nice ones, and they've been taking care of me since 91 probably. I built this one, 92. And you can see how each one of the forms is attached to the strong back on these 2x4s. The spacing is it's fairly important that you get those pretty close, otherwise it's going to again change the shape of the canoe a little bit. Here's the same form right side up, pretty much ready to go with strips. If you notice, well, on the picture, right there, and here, that's what's actually going to give you the lift in the nose right here. Because your first strip follows this line. And if you notice, this is actually 2.5 inches lower, this one's even lower still. And you can even add to that if you want more lift by putting one more strip on the bottom here. It's easy enough just to attach one more, so you can get just a little more lift here. There's really no advantage to that. The higher you get this, the more likely you are to catch wind in a crosswind. So having a little up here is good. Having too much, there's no gain. Other than maybe you think it looks better. That's okay. Another picture of the forms. Before I begin putting strips on, I cover this with masking tape, sometimes even 2 layers, because if you don't, there's always a little glue seepage between the strips. And you end up gluing this onto the form, it makes it real awkward trying to get off later. So we cover it real well. I even taken a little automotive wax and covered the tape to make it just a little less grip on there. All things that can save you trouble later on. There again, you see the shear line on these strips. These are all flat. This one's thicker down, this one's more, and this one's more still. And there's the strip starting to go on. Here's the stem piece that is actually this, and that fits on there like this. There's a screw that goes in here. You can put one screw in here, and you only do that because you want this to stay where it is, where it needs to be, until you get a few strips on it. And when you get enough strips on, you can take this screw out, leave this one in, and it won't wander on you at all. There's several ways of starting these first strips. This first strip always follows the forms, and the next strip can follow it, and continue to follow it. But as you get further up the form, you have to bend these more and more. You can see that this one, all the strips are bent. And if you look on this one, I raised it for a while until I got by this trim. And if you look closely, there's a triangle right here. This strip is actually straight, and this one is raising. So this is the part that I filled in there. And I found that was a little easier than having to fight the pressure of that bend. And then later on, you fill in that triangle space there, and it's just taking short strips and cutting them and fitting them. Sometimes there's kind of a long angle on here, but it's really not that hard to do. I mark them from behind with a good sharp pencil and put them on a bandsaw and cut them just a little big and sand them a little bit, they fit right in. You can do that any way you want, however, whatever suits you. Like I said, that bolt shows one way, this bolt shows another.
So you don't have the seam?
No, there's no need to. Being a 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch, there's quite a bit of flex in there. But like I said, when you get up, as you continue to bend these down, there seems to be more and more tension on them, and then you need to put more and more staples in them to hold them together until the glue dries. And the more staples you put in, pull out, and the more holes they have in the boat. The holes don't hurt anything, you can fill them, you can leave them the way they are. I take a little warm water, and I wipe over them, and it swells most of them shut. So, you occasionally get bubbles in the fiberglass if you have staple holes that haven't been closed. There's a little tiny speck of air in there, and when you fiberglass over it, that air wants to come up. And before it dries, you gotta pop them, or else you gotta sand them when it's hard. These two little sticks here, they're real handy to keep this strip from falling off on me all the time. I work on the strips up here on top of the boat when I need to bevel them or do some sanding on them. If you don't have those little catchers up there, they're forever falling off. Just another little thing I found out. Another view from the other side of the strips going on. And a front view. There seems to be some confusion always in this area right here. How do you deal with the ends of these strips? And what I've done is I run one by, and the one that mates with it, I run to it. And then on the next one, the next strip up, I run that one by, and then run this one to it. It sort of staggers that joint. There's really no strength in the cedar. The strength all comes from the fiberglass. So there's not much to gain there, other than you don't have all the joints on one side. They're staggered all the way up. And here you can see most of the, half of the side hull is laid up. You can see the difference in color, the white and even among the white cedar, there's lighter and darker. You got hardwood and you got softwood. And when you get to this point in instructions, this will be referred to as the football-shaped area. And some of the instructions, and you see the area. You see the area is from here to here, and it is shaped like a football. And some instructions will encourage you to actually lay this out on a table, a couple of tables together, pick the whole thing up, set it on the canoe, and then cut it to shape. I've never done that. It seemed like kind of a miserable job, and I found out that I prefer to do it this way. When the strips are laid up far enough that they come together so that you can actually run one strip down the center now, because it's laid up this high, and that would be this strip right here. Actually, there's three of them there. There's one right down the center, and then there's one on each side. And now, what I did is laid a strip here, another strip on this side, another strip on this side, and you'll see that in the following slides. But I found this to be a lot easier way for me to do it, and I prefer to do it this way. I never tried the football-shaped area in one big piece. Might work real good for you. Whatever you think is going to work for you is fine. This is the way that I found to do it. And here that football shape, or it's working off in the center, both ways. I think that slide's out of place. We'll leave it on that. Well, I see what it is. It's the start of filling in this triangle area here. And the next one shows it being filled in. These are all shorter strips here that meet up with this shear line strip. And there's just a couple to go here. And that's the piece you're looking for, the last piece. It's also the hardest piece to put in. There's the most cutting and trimming to do on it. But once you got that one done, you're done laying in strips. Then you start pulling staples and sanding. You see some of the tools up there that I use. This one stapler with 1/4-inch staples, and then I had another electric staple that had 1/2-inch staples in it. And the 1/2-inch staples go here into the ply each strip, they just pinch it together and put a staple in there. They'll sometimes they hold tight, sometimes they need just a little extra squeeze to make the glue ooze just that little bit. I'll demonstrate putting a couple staples, or strips on the staples. Not a lot of high technology involved. Lock plane, stapler, file, or a rasp. I used a hacksaw. I've even used a pruning shears to cut the length. You know, squeeze and snap it. It is real quick. And there's a couple of screwdrivers I modified for pulling staples. I just heated them up with a torch and put a little bend in and sharpen the head on so you can get under the staples. You want to try to avoid gouging the hull any more than you have to when you're digging around with that stapler, because you got to sand that out of there. You don't always have to sand it, but you do need to get the depth out of there, and hot water works with that too on a sponge. You just dabble a little bit, and that cedar swells right up. So it'll take a lot of that out of there. I estimate there is probably between 2,500 and 3,000 staples in the hull. And you put them all in there, you got to take them all out. There is a way to lay out the cedar strip canoe not using the staples. I've not done it myself because the staple lines in the hull didn't bother me enough. But you actually have an outer form that would be this shape. Actually, it would be a rectangle, but it would be in this shape on the inside, and you actually wedge the strips between this form and that outer form. It just seemed like a lot of extra work that I wasn't interested in doing. I helped a fellow a couple of years ago who built two canoes consecutively, and he did both of them that way. It worked fine. I guess I don't have the ambition to do it. So. This is the fully sanded hull, and before any glass goes on the full hull, I always put a couple layers here underneath this, and that's what you see there. This is just a small strip of fiberglass cloth, and if you cut fiberglass cloth on a bias across the grain, and I'll demonstrate that later too, you can make that glass take any shape you want. You can roll around something, you can make it fit on a compound bend like that, but you have to cut it on a bias. And if you do that, you can make it do whatever you want. Otherwise, it won't lay down. It'll always buckle, and it just won't lay flat. So, and I'll show you that later. This is a piece of the fiberglass cloth that's covering the entire hull, and you'll find that you need 60-inch wide cloth to go from gunnel around the gunnel. I used 50-inch, and it comes up a little short here, which means you got to put in a splice. And I tried that once. I didn't like having to deal with the splice, so I paid the extra money and bought 60-inch wide cloth. 50-inch doesn't quite do it. 60-inch you got a little trim. But I found it's worth whatever the little extra money is. Whenever you apply fiberglass, you lay it on the hull, and you do your best to smooth it out. It resists that a little bit because of the wood being kind of fibrous. But you start in the middle, you start wetting out the hull in the middle, and you work either both ways or work one way and then come back. I generally start in the middle and work both ways. I'll take a cup of resin, pour it out in the middle, or roll it out, and work both ways from center, and then mix up another cup of resin and work both ways from center. You do that because it seems as you work the cloth out, it seems to stretch just a little bit. And if you work that towards the middle, you'd end up with a bubble or a hump there, and then you'd almost have to cut it to get rid of it. By starting in the middle and working towards the ends, you just keep working that dry material away. Important point. It'll save you some trouble. And this is a piece of fiberglass cloth that's cut on the bias, and it's laid over the stem. And you'll see that there is a little bit of a bump right there, but because it's cut on the bias, that'll end up laying flat. I'll show you how to do that. Another view of the same, that's waiting to be wet out yet. And there it is, pretty well laid down. And starting to sand the inside. I can tell this is an old canoe because I don't use that sander anymore. It was just a flat sander. I use a double action or a DA dual action. It cuts a lot faster, and it's actually got a round pad on it. The hook and loop like Velcro discs. It seems to cover it well.
Jeff, on the previous slide, where you, yeah, that one there, are you still on the form, or have you removed the canoe from the form?
No, that's still on the form. Well, no, actually, that one is off the form. Because you see this block right here, it's just a 6x6 that it's leaning on. Yeah, it's been taken off the form. That's another two-person job, because everything about that canoe wants to hold it onto the form. And there's actually two screws here and here that you need to back out. Because the canoe needs to come up off of there, and it's not going to want to let go of this. So if you back these screws out, this piece will come right away. So you just kind of lift it up. My wife and I are able to do it. You just kind of keep working it like this, a little at a time. And it's kind of like pulling a garbage bag out of a pail that wants to stay in there. You know, there's a little suction in there, but it'll come off. And when it comes off, it's kind of wet noodly because it's only glassed on the outside. It's still kind of flexible. If you were to take that bolt off the form before you glass the outside of it, it would probably just collapse. There's no strength there at all. This brace I put in there, I measured the forms before I took the bolt off, and then I put a couple of screws in there, I think, right on the end of that strip, so that when you set the canoe down, it tends to go like this. So I put those screws in there to kind of hold it in position. I don't know if that's really necessary or not. I've not done it in the past. I did it that way on this boat. I thought it would help me keep the hull in the correct proportion. I did make a nasty mistake one time. I glassed a canoe. It was one like this, and I had it sitting on saddles like this. I glassed the whole inside of the canoe. There was no gunnels on it, and I noticed that it sort of looked like this, like the sides were sagging out. And for some reason, I thought it was a good idea to take I guess a rope and a couple of weights, and I hung it on there to bring it back. The glass was already in the canoe, and it was beginning to gel. And I looked at it, and yeah, it's much better. And then the house came out a couple hours later to check the temperature in the room, try to keep it up around 65 or 70. And all that glass, when I went from here to here, that glass buckled. So it had little blisters in there. And I'm looking at it, nothing I could do. Yeah, it was already, it was gelled up. It wasn't hard, but it was gelled up. You couldn't change it, so I just had to leave it. Then I had to go back in there and grind out all those little humps and then patch it. And I'm telling you, don't ever do that. If you're going to do that, do it before you wet out the glass, because then it's going to be in that shape and it's going to stay there. If the canoe is laying sort of like this and you glass it and then you pull it in, you're putting a little compression on that glass inside of the hull, and it'll do that. Don't ever do that. It made an awful lot more work. This looks like the hull is pretty well sanded on the inside. I spoke earlier about the difficulty in sanding, and it's this place right here where the curve of the canoe is. This is relatively flat. The well as right up in this gets pretty tight up there to even get a sanding block in. That doesn't need to be sanded quite as well because you really can't see in there anyway. And those little slight imperfections that might be in there aren't going to affect the canoe at all, other than visually, I guess. There it's ready for the glass to go in. And that's what the glass looks like when you lay it in there. Well, it doesn't want to lay flat because there's all these compound curves. And if you can see here, they actually got one corner of the glass here, one edge, and then you see how this is hanging down much lower on this side. And if you look on this side, it'll be just the opposite. This edge will be here, and this edge will be on that side. But what I'm trying to do is to put that glass in the hull on the bias. As little, I mean, you only get just that little bit, but every little bit helps. It'll help that to lay down a little better. That's my thought. Whether it actually happens like that is anybody's guess. But if you see what this looks like now, and on a couple slides later, how you want it to look, you do what you can. Now you can actually see that much better how much material is hanging down here and how little is here. So I got that much of a bias thrown into that. And it took me probably half an hour to smooth all this glass out to make it lay down into the canoe as best I could. And then I used clothespins to kind of hold it there. And another difficult cut is to try to cut that glass to fit into this part of the canoe. Best thing I found is a fine Sharpie. You reach in there, you kind of smooth it as best you can. You mark that with a Sharpie a little bit, you pull it back out, take a scissors and trim it, put it back in, see how well it lays. If there's something else that needs trimming, give it another try. I don't know how you'd ever lay that out, other than just kind of a rough mark. And there most of the excess is trimmed away. So this is real close already to start wetting out the interior of the canoe. And I mentioned earlier that you always want to start at the middle. I've done several different ways of wetting out the glass. You mix up a small cup of resin. There's resin on the table back there. There's actually a measuring cup next to it that I guess I got from one of the resin manufacturers. You don't ever want to mix too much more than that cup, because in the time it takes you to spread that out, it'll start to develop a little bit of heat, and once it begins to gel, you can't use it anymore. So if you mix too big a batch and you don't get it spread out in time, it'll just go bad. And if you happen to have it on the cloth already and it starts to go bad, now you got to get it off of there because it's beginning to gel. Gel is what I describe it. Well, just like it's like jelly. Grape jelly, it takes that consistency. And you can't do anything with it. So if you're holding a cup in your hand and it's beginning to feel just a little bit warm, set it aside. It's too late. You've mixed a little too much. And at the price of the resin, the epoxy, you don't need to be throwing any away. It usually takes about 1.5 gallons plus those bottles there. I was that much short of getting done with a 1.5 gallons. It's a 2-to-1 mixture. So you got a gallon of resin and you got a 1/2 gallon of partner, so it's 2-to-1. So 2 gallons is a little more than you need. I bought a quart and a pint in addition and didn't quite use it all. But I'll probably use that up on a bench on a paddle or something else. That's a photo of how you try to fit that glass tight up against that stem piece in the bow and stern. And I mentioned that I took a Sharpie and kind of made a rudimentary line in there and then trimmed it with the scissors. It'll also raise up with your scissors. It dulls them real fast. You're actually cutting glass.
So they don't overlap at all?
No, they didn't overlap in there at all. And I don't know if you noticed in these boats, I actually mixed up some resin. We put some silica thickener and glass micro oil balloons, they're called, and it thickens the resin. And I actually covered that stem piece with that as a waterproofer, adds some strength, and a place that's easy to clean in there, because that'd be a terrible place to try to clean out any debris that might be in there. But once you smooth that over like that, it just looks a lot better. And it also seals it, you don't have any chance of rot getting into the hull. And there the hull is pretty well wet out. You see I started in the middle and worked towards both ends. It might be clear here too that if you were working that cloth that way, you'd see how that could kind of bunch. And if it bunches there, you can take care of it. If it bunches in the middle, you got nowhere to go with it. A little closer view of the same thing. There have been questions in the past about this being a dry line. This resin is still wet. It may be beginning to gel here and a little bit less and less, but I've never had any problem as long as I keep working at it. You know, keep mixing resin, keep brushing it on. I've never had a problem with the dry line. I wouldn't want to leave this for an hour or two, because then I think you would have a dry line, and you'd have some sort of, it would look like a defect where the glass might have actually been somewhat wet from the resin, and then it dried and cured, but it wasn't laid down on the wood. So now you'd have to try to get that to lay down. So once you get started at wetting out the glass, stay with it. Temperature is kind of important with polyester in particular, a little bit with epoxy. They recommend 65 as a minimum. And the warmer it is, the faster it sets. And they also have different speeds in the hardeners. They got fast, medium, and slow. So based on the temperature and the speed of your hardener, you can adjust that a little bit. Generally, when I get everything wet out, I crank up the heat, get her set up quick. Usually takes about 3-4 hours to get it past the tacky stage, and then you're good to go. If you recover resin within 24 hours, there's no need to sand the surface or do any other. There's a wax in polyester resin that rises to the surface. It's called amine blush, and if you wait more than 24 or maybe more than 36 hours, you need to remove that wax with a thinner or a sander. So if you give it another coat right away, within 24 hours, you don't need to deal with that. You just go right over it. And the fiberglass always takes more than one coat. When the first coat you give it, once it gels up and hardens, you'll see the weave. And the second coat will cover the weave. And if you want it a little smoother than that, you can put a third coat on it. There comes a point when all you're doing is add more weight. So once the weave is full, that's really all you need to do. Occasionally on the inside bottom of the canoe, I'll put a very light second coat on because I want to leave that weave just a little bit for traction. This stuff gets a little bit slippery when it's wet. So if you leave a little weave in there, it's got a little texture. Not quite so slippery. And that's the whole canoe done, and you see that I got braces in there on this one. I guess you don't need that many braces. One in there is probably not a bad idea. But remember what I said about hanging a weight on there. To pull that down and pull that together, it's trouble. Be careful with that. View of the finished stem. And that's where the deck is going to fit. This space right here. The stem piece actually came all the way up till here. And I needed to remove that in order to make space for this deck that's in here. And it's kind of a funny place to have to cut because you're cutting into a corner. I guess I tried about everything. A saw at an angle and a cut this way and a chisel going through it. All you need to do is take it down, whatever the thickness of this deck is. I used to set the deck flush here, flush with this edge. And since then I've decided that I like this look better. So now the deck is only sitting in there a 3/4 inch cord, probably a 1/2 inch. So I didn't have to take that down quite so far. I guess I'd like to make it clear that everything that I do here is the way that I found to do it. You guys are welcome to do anything you want. Give it a try.
What tools are you using when you're up in the front there? Kind of push the glass out. So.
To push the glass out?
Yeah, to saturate it. And,
I use a roller. I use a roller quite a bit, a small roller like this. I also like to squeeze just a flat piece of plastic. You actually pour some resin on the flat surface, and you just take this squeegee and start moving it around. And you don't want to leave puddles, but you want to make sure everything's wet. Everything's got to be wet out so it sticks to the hull. I've used brushes, rollers, and squeegees. And when you get up into the corner there, then you take a small, I use throwaway brushes to the, I don't know, the 89 centers at Walmart. It costs you more in acetone to clean a brush than it does the price of the brush. You'll end up using probably 4 brushes on a hole like this. But I take the brush and, instead of brushing, you just kind of push it like this, because you're going into a blind corner. It's kind of hard to get anything up in there. If you have excess cloth, it'll end up being a little bunch right there. And if you try not to wet that out so much, that extra cloth, it's pretty easy to cut off with a razor knife, and then you're done with it. After the stuff sets up, that glass is the sharpest glass. Those hardened glass fibers, it's real easy to get yourself cut up on there. So when this is hardened up and you need to go up in there and work with all the time, it'll save you some bad time. And there's where I'm putting in that putty that I made out of the resin with the silica thickener and the glass microbeads. There's a source in the handle I got here that tells you where to get that stuff. It's kind of a real fluffy looking little powder that you mix with the resin. It turns it white and it expands the bulk. It makes a pint of resin into a real thick, sticky sort of putty that you can actually trowel on, and it's viscous enough that it'll stick there. It doesn't just run like the resin does. And this is a view of the gunnels getting assembled. These are the decks that I put in one boat, and I cut a little fancy arc on here that I probably traced from way up. This is a strip of ash, and it's got I guess it's right back there. It's got 4-inch blocks glued to it. This is actually a piece of the outwale, which is just a solid piece. It's a piece of 3/4 inch by 1/2 inch ash that I ran over a router. I routed it off both sides. So that sits on there like this. And this is a piece of the inwale, which would be here. And these are 4-inch blocks, one continuous piece with 4-inch blocks attached to them, and a 4-inch space between each one. The first canoe I made, I didn't put these spaces in here. I just put an inwale in there. Looked all right, worked all right. I found out later that by doing this, you always get water in a canoe. It drips off your paddle. When you want to dump that water out, it won't run out because this is solid. You got to shake it out, you got to wipe it out. By doing this, the water runs out between these spaces here. And it also is great for lashing down anything you have in the canoe. A shotgun, a pack, camera, anything you don't want to lose in the bottom of the lake. You'll eventually tip a canoe over. It happens. But by having these spaces in here, it makes a great place to lash things down. You can kind of thread a rope back and forth through there, keep everything with you if you use still. It doesn't really take that much time. By gluing a block on, using another block for space, or gluing another one on, all I did is put a clamp on there. Some of the squeeze clamps you see on the cable, are the spring clamps. Elmer's white glue, they've held up for years. There is screws through some of them. The first, and there's a screw going through the hull to hold the outwheel on. When the inwheel is going to be installed, then you run a screw from the outside into it, and then you have no screw showing from the inside. And that's why I did that. Seems to hold real well. It is repairable. It is removable if you have to. I've never had to take one off to repair it. If you choose to, you can try to calculate where these blocks are going to be before you put this outwheel on, so that you don't have a screw showing on the inside here. I guess that's another one of those things that doesn't bother me enough that I would take the trouble to not have that screw show. A couple of them showing like that is nothing to worry about. And this thing is actually built as one long unit. And I build them a little bit long, and then I fit them in there and go to the other end and cut off what I don't need, usually a couple inches. Much of this stuff is spliced, either the whole material and the ash. It's pretty pricey to find 16 or 17 foot ash boards, so I buy an 8 footer, 9 footer, and I put a scarf joint on them, and I'll show you that later too. I set up a little jig, I cut a real sharp angle on there, sand it a little bit, glue them together. It's been working fine. And that's another view of the inwheel of the gunnel system. You see the spaces and the blocks. This block is actually longer because that's where the yoke attaches. These are all 4-inch blocks, and I think this is a 7-inch block. And that gave me just a little bit of leeway as to where that yoke gets mounted in there, because you want the yoke slightly ahead of center, so when you get it up on your shoulders and you walk with it, it naturally, the ball raises just a little bit. Otherwise, you're actually holding it up. This way, all you do is hang on to it, and it naturally wants to tip down. It makes it just a little bit easier to walk. Better to have 2 people carrying it if you can. Split the weight. That canoe, I think was 57 pounds. This one, I think, is 68 or 69 pounds. So they're not terribly heavy. They're not Kevlar light either. But they're certainly lighter than aluminum canoes and a lot of the other materials. That is the outwheel part of the gunnel installed. And that's the inwheel being installed. You see that little block I had there? The hull is not trimmed back yet. I actually mount these strips slightly below the edge of the hull, and then I sand that away so that I don't end up with the hull actually being a little bit lower than the edge of this. I try to avoid that. And I actually made a little block there. You can't see it, but there's a little tiny notch in there that would allow whatever part of the hull is above to be accounted for, and you can lay it on there kind of level. I since found out that you can do that by eye. If it looks straight, it's probably straight. That's the old carpenter. You can use a level all you want. If it looks straight, it probably is. And there I took a block plane, and I removed that little bit of hull that I didn't need. A block plane works, a little sure form tool works, a belt sander. Be careful with the belt sander, it cuts off fast. That DA sander works real good there too. There's no finish on anything yet, so I really have to be concerned about that. And there's the ports and the carrying yoke being installed. I guess I mentioned earlier that I don't use the ports anymore because of the way I install the seats. They actually take the place of those things. And the canoe seems plenty rigid. And that's how I installed seats earlier. This is actually a hanger here. That's a piece of 3/4 inch lumber, probably 3/4 by 1 1/4 inch. And there's a hole drilled through the gunnel, through the block, and then there's a through bolt going through there, and there's a nut on the bottom. That's the way the instructions read. That's the way I built them. I actually, I guess you can tell here that this one looks a little bit shorter than this one. Then that's to give the seat just a little bit of a lean. It seemed like it might be more comfortable that way rather than being flat and have just a since then, I've been building canoes like these two are, with just a block, actually, resin on to the side of the canoe, and then a screw going down into the block. That's what I think takes the place of the board. There is some strength involved here because the hull would have to flex and tear that away, I guess, but it seems stronger to me the way that I've been doing it. So, and that's the reason I do it that way. It's also easier than trying to drill that through hole through there. A couple of times, I guess, I've drilled off the side, had to make a new block.
You can adjust it for it too, with this.
You can, yes, yes. I mean, if you wanted to take that apart and change it, you could. This would be a little more difficult to take that off of it. I guess that's it. Any questions?
But you see, did you put that together?
That's
the order, or?
I made one set of seats, and I found that it's a lot of work. It's particular, and I found out I could buy a seat for $35. It wasn't worth my time.
Sure.
So, that's pretty much standard caning. I mean, people have been doing it for 1,000 years, I guess. No reason you can't do it, but you know, like I said, for $35 or $40, I'll buy a seat. So,
When you put the gunnel on or the end wheel on, they're not glued on at all, no. They're just, the hardware is the only thing that's actually holding on.
the first one I built, I actually, maybe the second one too, I actually did put some epoxy in there, and it just seemed a lot of messing around. And with a screw in there about every 8 inches, it's never been an issue that wasn't strong enough, or I didn't think it was going to last, or anything else. So they're just screwed on, stainless steel, pan-head, oval-head screws.
What's that way to take it off easier to repair it?
If you need to, you can always take it off of there now. If you had it glued on, you'd have to fight that glue yet too.
How many foot of glass do you have on?
Pardon me?
How many foot of glass?
The outside actually has, well, from the water line to the water line, fiberglass comes in 38-inch widths, 50-inch widths, and 60-inch widths. And if you take a 38-inch piece, it goes above the water line to water line in the middle of the canoe. And I've been using a 4-ounce piece of cloth when I can find it, 38 inches wide, and put that on the bottom. And then I take a 60-inch wide 6-ounce and cover that from gunnel to gunnel all the way around, and that leaves just a little trim, and you don't have to deal with that seam. I've been having trouble finding 4-ounce cloth lately, so I've been using 6. All that does is add a little bit of weight. Because the cloth is a little thicker, you have to put a little more resin on to wet it out.
And then you get it, the second one on in less than 24 hours?
I tried to.
So you don't have to sand it?
Don't have to sand anything. Yeah.
Sweet.
I've actually found that, let's see, it was a thinner I found in a hardware store that actually cuts wax. And it wasn't anything like MEK, it was pretty common. Maybe it was turpentine or paint thinner. I took some wax and I rubbed it on something, and I rubbed it with this thinner, and it cut it. So I thought that would do the same thing as sanding, because you want to remove that wax that's built into polyester resin. But if you do it within 24 hours, you don't need to. You put the first coat on, come back the next day, put the second coat on, come back the next day, put the second coat over the second layer of glass, and you're pretty much good.
So you have 2 layers of glass and 3 layers
Of resin, yeah. And the inside only has 1 layer of glass, 2 at least. You almost have to put 2 on, because the first one doesn't fill the weave. The second coat fills the weave. And if you look at these closely on the bottom, you can see the weave in there a little bit. And that's because it's the inside bottom that want a little texture there for your feet. Any other questions on the slide? Do you want to see anything again?
I noticed that there's no keel at all on the bottom. Is that standard?
The first one I built had a keel, and per instruction. And I since found out that turns that into a tipping point. It cuts an inch or so off the depth of the water you can travel, place to rock. Also, you need to make a hole in the bottom of the canoe to screw the keel on. So now you've got a series of holes in the bottom that can let water in, can rot. I don't use them anymore, and I would recommend not using them. Many manufactured canoes, the older ones in particular, aluminum and the plastic ones, it was a cheaper, easier way to make a canoe. You made it in 2 halves and glue it together. Instead of making it in one big form, you would make these 2 halves and you would glue them together there. You naturally got a keel then because that's where they attach them. But you don't see keels on canoes much anymore. Aluminum was sometimes made that way too, in 2 halves. So I wouldn't recommend it.
How long are each of these?
This one's 16 and a half, and this one's about 18.4. This one would have ended up 18 feet, but I ran the strips past the stem piece in order to make them join here. The instructions were to cut the strips off flush, and you would actually see this. And this piece has to be beveled slightly for those strips to lay on it. I took a 4.5-inch angle grinder and some coarse sandpaper and just beveled that a little bit, and then I actually glued the strips to the stem piece.
Now, you make that out of 2 layers of plywood?
No, I do, yeah. I take 2 layers of either half-inch treated plywood, and I use this as a trace. And I actually trace this on a piece of plywood, and then I take a compass or dividers, and I just, make a 1-inch line outside of that, and I saw that out, and I glue those 2 pieces together. You actually need 4 of them. Either you laminate it ahead of time, or you cut 4 of them, laminate 2 for this and 2 for that. So you end up with a piece of 1 inch thick by about 1 inch high. And that's just what you attach the strips to. And I actually glue them on there. Like I said, I take a grinder and I kind of bevel those so that the strips lay right up against it, and I should get good glue contact there. And when at the end of the day, the strength comes in the fiberglass. You do whatever you want to the wood, you're still dealing with a piece of 1/4-inch thick cedar or 1/2-inch laminated plywood. The strength is in the fiberglass. So.
If I followed you correctly, you said you had like 4-inch glass, and then you're going over that with 6-inch? Or
6
ounce?
ounce, yeah, ounce. I think they weigh that per yard, 4 ounces per yard, 6 ounces per yard, or maybe it's whatever width by the foot. I'm not exactly sure what that is. I don't think putting 2 layers of 6-ounce cloth on the outside adds that much weight. If you're really concerned about weight, you go to Kevlar. And actually, one of the Boy Scout leader that I coached with these canoes, he actually had a cedar strip canoe at home that he used as a form and took a Kevlar canoe off it. He put some mold release on there and then laid Kevlar cloth over it and then wet it out with epoxy resin. I've never seen the boat done. I came over and helped him wet it out that day, and I never got back to see it, so I don't know how it turned out. Kevlar had some problems too, as being too thin and too light. It actually had a lot of spring to it, and they actually had to lay some ribs into it on the inside to stiffen them a little bit. And they've done a good job. Kevlar canoes are great, but they're expensive. They're lightweight, but they're really expensive.
So then as you put these strips, you're coming on the curve here, you have to actually kind of mold.
And I do. This is a little jig that I made for galvan strips. It's no more than a piece of 1-inch lumber with a couple of strips on it that you can take a strip like this and lay it in there, and now it'll stand up for you. And then you take a block plane, and it usually takes 3 passes. The first pass you're taking off the very tip of the inside edge. And the second pass you're taking just a little bit more, and the third pass you usually got the bulk of bevel you need. And then that'll fit. You see here the strip is actually straight up, and they stack up real nice. But once you get up here, they actually need to be beaten cold, like with those things, or you need to take just a little bit of a bevel off there. If you don't do that, you're putting 2 square things together, but you're making them fit like this. So So you're gonna leave a little open gap in there. By taking just that little bit of a bevel off that edge, they'll actually fit pretty tight. And this is pretty crude. I'm sure we can come up with all kinds of better ideas than this, but it worked. You start the strip here, you take a couple of passes across it, you pass it down, a couple more passes, and before you know it's done. It's close enough. It really does make a pretty tight joint. The bead and cold really shines there because you've got one fitting into the other. So if you only bead and cold, say 15 strips, that would give you, or 14, it'd give you 7 on this side and 7 on this side. And this canoe here is actually, has a sharper bend. If we were to get one of those forms up there, you would see it. It's straighter here and it's straighter across the bottom. So it's got a sharper, a smaller area of bend, but it's sharper. So you need to pay a little more attention to that in that area. I guess I mentioned about the resin. Don't mix too much because you'll just wait. If it starts getting warm in your hand, you're real close to losing it. The higher the temperature, the faster it goes off, the faster it sets up. And on the other hand, the cooler it is, the slower it goes off. So you can actually adjust it a little bit. When you use polyester resin, they got a peroxide hardener, and you might take say 2 cups of resin, and if you put 1 drop of hardener in there, it'll set up. It might take days, but if you put 30 drops of hardener in there and stir it up, it may start getting warm in your hand already. So you can adjust that a little bit. You can make that stuff go out faster or slower by how much hardener you put in it. Now with the epoxy resin, it's all 2 to 1. It's all 2 parts resin, 1 part hardener. And then you can adjust the speed with heat or with the speed. And to prevent that, you buy say a polyurethane varnish that has UV inhibitor in it, and that's your last coat. I haven't been doing that. I actually took a piece of 1-inch lumber, I covered it with some epoxy resin, some polyester resin, and then half of that, I put a UV inhibitor varnish on, and I put it out in my yard for a winter, a summer, and a winter. And I looked to see if it was cloudy, and I couldn't tell it was. I couldn't tell any difference between the ones that I put the UV inhibitor on and the ones I didn't. So over years, I'm sure it'll have an effect. But I don't store my canoes outdoors. I store them indoors up in the rafters somewhere. So it's never really been an issue.
Jeff, you said an ideal temperature though is what, 65 when you're working with that?
65, yeah, that's a pretty good temperature. You really need about 60 in order to have the stuff set up fairly quick. And when you get up about 70, it kind of works against it. So I'll try to get about 65, 70, and then when I'm all done and I want it to harden up, I'll crank the heat up. Yeah, I use a torpedo heater for that, but I'm not going to be in there. It burns diesel fuel, roars like a bugger. But it generates a lot of heat, but you really don't want to be working in there then either. Probably carbon monoxide comes out crazy. But,
Can you talk a little bit about safety, flammability of any of these?
polyester, I think, is very flammable. Epoxy has almost no smell. I guess I can smell it, but not bad at all, and it's not flammable. I prefer the epoxy. If I was going to use polyester, I'd definitely use a respirator, definitely. I would change cartridges on there every time. I mentioned earlier, maybe before we actually got started, that one of my probably the first 2 boats I built, I used polyester resin, and I didn't use a respirator. My wife claimed she could smell it on my breath for 2 weeks.
Has the epoxy changed in this 30, 40 years as far as smell?
It may have. I didn't start using epoxy until probably the mid-90s.
Oh.
So in that time, it's not that bad. Polyester is way, way cheaper. The last time I bought it, I probably paid $20 a gallon for it. And you resin is probably $80, $90 a gallon plus the hardener, which is probably another $50 or $60 a gallon.
So what's the durability between the two?
I've not owned a boat long enough to have one go bad. So I guess anything that's made out of fiberglass, like truck caps and boats, is pretty much all polyester resin. It was used, it was sprayed on with a chopper gun. It's spraying all resin and chopped fibers onto a form. That's been gel coated. So that stuff's been around forever. I mean, there's still little truck caps around that. They're starting to, they show a little chalk on the gel coat. They maybe check a little bit. But those things are out in the sun continuously when you're not in the garage.
Do we ever rubber those at all?
I did with the polyester. I found that I can be fairly careful with the epoxy, that I really don't get that much on me. And there wasn't anything in the MSDS that said it was really, really bad to touch on. Yeah, it's a little sticky. Acetone cuts it, if you want to. I mean, you really need to clean it off. Put a little drop of acetone on it and rub it off your skin. Probably not the best idea either. I suppose acetone isn't any good for you. I was going to show you something about these scarf joints.
What's the dark strip?
The dark strip is red cedar, western red cedar. The light strips are all white. This is a scarf joint. I don't know if you can see that. It's just a sharp angle. And that's enough to glue these strips together with. You can just overlap them, and that's strong enough. It really doesn't have to be that strong. It's just got to stay together long enough for it to get the resin on there. And I made this little jig. Pretty simple. It's a couple pieces of plywood that are screwed onto another piece of plywood. And then I cut a real sharp angle in there with a good sharp handsaw. There's really not much to it. I never did lay out the angle. I don't even know what it is. It's probably 15 degrees or something like that. But you can just lay a strip in there. And I took another one of the little wedges that I cut off of something, and I use that to pinch that in there so that it stays. And as long as you use a good sharp handsaw, you can make repeatable angles like that all day. And I'll take 10-foot long strips and splice them together to make 20-footers. And what I'll usually do is I'll saw a bunch of these. I'll use sand this just a little bit and lock and clean that sawdust off of there. That's all it takes, just to get it fairly smooth. And then you just put a little glue on them, overlap them, and take a spring cleaner. And try to do this on a long table so that you actually get these things to lay pretty fat. You don't want them to end up like this, so you get them pretty flat. And that's really all it takes. And I'll, before I quit for the day, I'll glue maybe a dozen of these together. And then the next day, I've got a dozen of them to work with. And I usually put a strip on one side, put a strip on the other side, another strip, another strip. If you got 6 strips like that, that's plenty for until the glue dries. So you got 6 on each side, and then before you quit for the day, you make 12 more. So you got 12 more to lay up the next day, or 10 more. You got 5 on each side, and it seems to work well enough. The Boy Scouts eventually spliced these on a form, and they just put a couple of staples in. All they had was butt splices, and the Scout leader said it worked. It would save them having to cut and glue all these strips together ahead of time. So it worked for those guys.
You just use standard glue on the splice and on the whole strip?
This is, mostly I used Elmer's white glue, but I don't know, I found this somewhere probably on sale. And if you whenever you glue, if you put a little glue on the surface and you actually rub it like this, that spreads the glue and it makes a bond. It works a little bit into the wood. I always do that, just slide them together a little bit and clamp them. You could probably use that strip in a couple hours. I think the setup time is, I mean, you could certainly glue some together in the morning and use them in the afternoon. These small clamps, a bunch of these are handy. Whenever you're sanding this cedar, it's a very resinous wood, and you should be careful not to be breathing that either. It might have been the newspaper article you had there. There was another one before that. A doctor from Chilton called me and warned me about that. I hope you're wearing a respirator when you're sanding that damn cedar. Because it really is a very resinous wood. It's really, really fine dust, and you work with that in your shop, and you'll have cedar dust all over everything, and you don't need that any once. I use this DA sander now, and it's got a little dust collection system on it. It isn't that efficient, and I took a shop vac and I fit it onto here. This is removable, and it fit on there fairly well. I wrapped a little duct tape on there, and I run that shop vac whenever I'm sanding. And that really does take an awful lot of the dust out of the air and away from your shop. I coached one guy some years ago. He took over, he had a split level house, and he took over the family room downstairs and built a canoe down there, just about caused a divorce. Between the dust and the smell of the polyester. I don't think his wife likes me yet. He made the choice to build a thing down there. I just encourage him. But he actually, he hung some plastic over the basement steps at the bottom and at the top. But, you know, you run your heating system and that stuff still circulates around the house. You wouldn't have it.
When you're using these spliced pieces, do you try to put them in different places and go?
I do, yeah. I'm not sure if you can see them here. Right, here's one. Here's one, there's one, there's one, here's one. If you look closely, you can see them. If you didn't know they were there, you might not even notice. You can also see the staple line if you look at these goals. And that's actually resin that pooled into that staple hole, and that's why it looks a little darker. If you take a damp sponge with warm water, then you rub those just a little bit, a lot of that will swell shut, but it'll still show some kind of mark. And there's even, you see little pock marks in between here. That's, this is where a form was, and this is the form piece, and these staples are just enough to hold that strip together until the glue dry. So there's extra staple holes in there. Actually, putting the strips on is pretty straightforward. Question?
No.
I got 1/4-inch staples in this one, and this one's loaded up with half. Normally, these strips would be full length, and I would run them from stem piece past the stem piece, but just for demonstration, all I'm going to do is staple a couple of them on there. You want to keep it flush on the bottom. I kind of like this electric stapler. It saves an awful lot of squeezing. Another thing you might want to do is these last few forms are actually square. And if you bevel this edge just a little bit, it fits on there a little better. If you look at those forms back there, they're beveled quite a little bit. I did that to them because it fits on there so much better. It gives you a much wider stapling area. And then the next one, I buy this glue in bigger bottles, but I always get one small bottle like this. This fine tip on it. And this gluing is nothing top secret either. At one time I tried brushing it on there and that just took too long. But if you get a kind of a steady grip, and all you need to do is lay a little bead on there. If you plane your lumber before you saw it, you're actually dealing with a pretty smooth surface. If it's rough sawn, they're not going to fit together quite so good. I guess if you wanted to, you could actually take your finger and kind of wipe that in there, but I'm not found that it needs to have that done. And that's really enough glue on there. If you put more glue on, all it does is ooze, and then you need to sand it off. You don't always have to sand it. You can take a paint scraper and kind of just scrape that edge off of there. But the more glue you put on, the more glue you got to take off. And then the next one. Of course, this would be a full-length strip again. You just try to make good contact on there with the one you already have on. Take the corduroy staples, and you see you just give that a little squeeze, and you can see it just oozes a little bit, and you need to put one staple in there. If you can't get them tight enough, sometimes you need to put two. Or if you're putting a lot of bend in them, sometimes you put two staples in them. And remember to try to keep the inside of the hull flush. Is more important than having the outside of the hull flush. Because it's easier to sand the outside of the hull than it is the inside of the hull. So keep that in mind. That's really all there is to it. It's not at all hard to do. It's a long process. It takes a lot of time. The first one that I kept track of, I thought I had about 150 hours in. The last one that I actually kept track of time, I thought I had 95 hours in. And I read I think it was a magazine article in Wisconsin DNR magazine. Two guys built one, and I thought they said they had 80 hours in it. Now, whether that was 80 man hours or two men working 80 hours, I'm not clear on that. I can see where it could be two men working 80 hours. I don't think you get twice as much done with two guys working on it necessarily. And you would run these strips, flush here, flush, flush, attach them onto the stem piece here, and whatever line they laid on. And like you could lay one or two strips on this side, one or two strips on this side, one or two strips here, come up this way. And I would always stagger. I always lay one and one, or two on one side, two on the other. I wouldn't go, 8 strips and 8 strips on this side. I guess I wouldn't do that. I would keep going back and forth. Gives the glue a little chance to set up. If you run into a snag of some kind, you maybe got a chance to work it out. Double this. Like I said, you put a screw in here, maybe one here, one here. Be sure to take the screw off before you get the strips beyond it, because it's not accessible anymore. And when I put those screws in there, I purposely used a long screw and let them stick out so that it wasn't sunk down in there that I just didn't see it. But I would leave that screw stick out of there, and so you just couldn't miss that you didn't leave it in there by mistake. Center lines with this form, with the patterns that are on that table, they're laid out in halves. So you You lay this out on the wood, you flip it over, lay this out. Be sure to trace the center line, and then you line up these center lines with a string, or straight edge, whatever you got, use a string. Because if this one is offset this way, it's going to put a bump in this side of the canoe, and it's going to put a hollow in this side of the canoe. If you can picture that, it's going to offset that a little bit. If you line these centers up, you won't have that problem. The other thing I do is I look down and see to it that it looks flat. If you're building a canoe that's got rocker into it, rocker being the canoe looks like this, very exaggerated. Rocker may only be 1.5 inches or 2 inches. The stems are higher in the middle. That makes the canoe turn faster because you don't have quite as much of a problem storing the water as you do in the middle. Very, very flat bottom canoes track better. They paddle straight in the water better. If you look at this entry line here, it's nearly square. If you look at the entry line there, it's very rounded. That canoe will turn faster than this one will, but this canoe will track better than that one will. You can't have it both ways.
Lake versus river.
Yeah, which is really what it is, lake versus river. Maybe I'll bring this back there. This is fiberglass cloth. This is actually 4 ounce. 6 ounce would have just a little bit coarser weave to it. Other than that, I don't know how you tell the difference. And you see to it that this is how it came off the bowl. This is the long straight edge, and this would be the end. Now, if you look at this, I pull it, and it's very taut. And you pull it straight on this weave, and the same thing. But now, this is the bias, I'm going across it, you can make that do anything. It don't take any shape. And all you do is, when you cut this, you take your scissors, and you cut it across this way, not straight. This is the bias, cutting it this way. And say you want to put a piece over the stem there, and you want it 4 inches wide, you would cut across here, you cut across here, and you can make that take any shape you want it to take. You lay it on there, you wet it out, and it'll lay flat. That's very important. If you're going to do any of that, cut it on your bias. There's always a lot of leftover material. Because you got 60-inch wide going on the end there, there's quite a little bit of trim.
And on the end, you said you put 2 layers on first, and then you put 2.
I mean, 2 layers is what I do. You could put one on, you could put cover the whole hull, and then you can put a couple more layers on. I even made a patch one time. I call it a Band-Aid. It looks sort of like a blister. When this was all done, I covered this whole area here, like this, with car wax, and then I even left it built up on there a little bit, and I put some masking tape on. No, there was car wax, masking tape, and then a lot of car wax over that yet. And then I took some material, cut it on the bias, and I laid it on here, and I made just a little patch that looked about like that. And then I took just a couple little dabs of silicone caulking, and I caulked that on there. So now I got a removable Band-Aid on.
The heating and cold strips. I noticed that in some of the magazines I've read that there's a source for them, multiple sources if you want to buy a whole kit or something like that. Are those thicker than what you're using and wider, or?
I think they're pretty close to what I'm using. These are actually a little bit less than 3/4 of an inch. And I think I scavenged this lumber somewhere, and it had been planed down. Generally, I shoot for 3/4 or a little better. I have lumber sawed at 1 inch, and then I plane it down minimally just to make it smooth.
How about the thickness?
Thickness, I stick with 1/4. And if anything, I go a little bit less. Now there again, I don't use a micrometer on it. A 1/4 inch, somewhere right around there, seems to work real well. This is some source material, if you'd like to take one and pass it on. It's got names and addresses and some email places to buy material. And I checked these, they're all still open. I had some in there that are no longer around. If you want to buy a whole kit, there's a company called Chesapeake Light Craft out of Massachusetts, I think. And they'll sell you a whole kit. The strips will be in there, the forks will be in there, the gunnel pieces. It's pretty pricey, but you can assemble it yourself.
Patterns?
I believe that's all, let's see. Got to have a strong back. So either you're going to build one, or I think you got to build it. And they'll sell you everything you need to build it, minus the strong back. But the plans will be in there for the strong back. And I actually have a print on the back of this that is a layout thing. That is a layout of that form back there. And you could use these forms on that strong back if you wanted to. And these are available to trace. If anybody wants to use them, you can trace them. I'm not using that form right now, so if anybody wanted to use it, I would loan it with a security deposit because I want it back. I guess maybe that's not a loan, but I want it back. This one belongs to, this one here belongs to one of the gentlemen that's here, and that's completely up to him. It's not for loan for me, but you can trace the forms. I would let you come over and trace the forms, and you have a print to build the strong back. The strong back's really pretty easy. There's not too much to it. Anybody need a break? 5, 10 minutes? No? There's a ratio between the width and the length. Now, you wouldn't have to take it out, but that's what they recommend, is take out the center one. You could leave the center one in and move each one of these in 1 1/8 inches. And you would shorten the canoe up by about a foot. So you'd have the same width, you'd have a little shorter canoe, and be just a little bit lighter. So you can change it a little too. Oh, that was all done on a router too. Actually, I took a router and I bored a hole underneath my table saw and mounted a router underneath it. And I stabled it already, and it was pretty sturdy, so I just mounted a